I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Thursday, February the 1st, where we saw an adjustment on the basis there. Your spot February live cattle was down about $1 on the board, which was right even with what your fat sold on Tuesday, which was $1 lower on a live basis. And we saw a little bit more trade on Wednesday, but just kind of evening things up. Your feeder board was down quite a bit, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Let's check out the board. Right now on April, live cattle was down $1.25 on Wednesday to end the day at 122.92, and like I said, your February spot live cattle down 97 cents to even up the basis, which they're liking to keep right around $2. And your basis, of course, is the difference between your cash and your current futures price, and that's where most of your cattle feeders live as far as trying to hit break evens or make a living feeding cattle. But your February ended the day on Wednesday at 123.85. March feeder cattle down $2.12, 145.05, and April down $1.95 at 145.85. And that kind of just goes to show that we know that we're headed towards lower fat cattle prices down the road. But after last week's $4 jump in the market, a lot of people got to thinking maybe we're going to see $1.30 before it starts to tail off again. But you know, actually we're sitting pretty good. If you remember the beginning of last week, most of your guys were just hoping to get $1.25, and they ended up getting $1.27. But now we're back down to $1.26, and we may not reach that $1.30, but I think we still have some weeks of tight numbers of market ready cattle. And with your packers coming out on Tuesday and bidding to buy this week, that goes to show that that they need the cattle. So I wouldn't give up on cranking this market up another few bucks here and living in your mid to high 20s until we get into those heavier supplies of market ready cattle and start tailing off. But your fat cattle on Wednesday, they had a few sales in the northern plains at that $2 dressed, and that's steady with last week where we had the live market at 127. But we're pretty much set at 126 this week. On Tuesday, they sold 37,600 head in the 5-area feeding region at that 126. We didn't really see any more 126 on Wednesday, but that's going to be the market if we have any more live sales. But the southern plains is pretty well cleaned up, but the northern plains still has some selling yet to do, and the packers need to buy more cattle for during this week's trading to kind of get to where they need to be as far as filling their needs. But on that 126 with the board down the dollar on Wednesday, if your broker didn't get you out of the hedges on Tuesday and messed around and didn't get it done until late in the day on Wednesday, great. You picked up another buck, so that wouldn't have been a problem. That happens from time to time, you hear about, but in this case it would have been a blessing. But the slaughter has kept a good pace so far this week. 351,000 through Wednesday. That's 35,000 better than last week. You remember started out the week last week with some slowdowns in the northern plains due to blizzard conditions, and then kind of had a dark day in the southern plains at least one packing plant because of cleanup and fixing up the cooler and things like that. But compare that 351,000 to the same week last year, and up 16,000. So we're running at a pretty good click on the slaughter, and your packers are still going to need cattle. You look at your feeder markets, your real-time index based on the 800-pound steer on Beef Market Central late in the day on Wednesday at 146.30, and that's up 62 cents, even though your board was down quite a bit. We had some markets on Wednesday in the Midwest and Northern Plains with some pretty bell-ringing prices there, including Bassett, Nebraska, and that helped prop things up. And actually your feeder market's still pretty good, and the board being down a little over $2 on your most popularly traded month, that's not a big deal in this day and time. It would have been several years ago, but we're used to the volatility now, and it could be back up here on Thursday. You never know. But you look at the big sale on Wednesday, it was OKC West, of course, in El Reno, Oklahoma. 12,000 head, including their calves on Tuesday. Their feeder steers were $1 to $3 lower, with the exception of those heaviest weight steers weighing over 8.5, and they were mostly steady. Must have been missing a heifer buyer there, because the feeder heifers were quite a bit lower, $3 to $5 lower. But if you remember on Tuesday, your calves were selling $3 to $6 higher, and still good demand for grass calves, even though we're still in the dead of winter. Guys want to get those stocker cattle warmed up and ready to turn out as quick as they can in the early spring. But Dodge City, Kansas, 3,700 head at Winter Livestock there, and their feeders were mostly steady, but their heifers were quite a bit lower too, with those weighing over 6.5, selling $3 to $6 lower. But we've had a pretty open winter for the most part. I know we've had a snowstorm here and there, and some blowing blizzard conditions in some spots, but for the most part it's been good cattle feeding weather, cold and clear, and it's been good for the guys that are in their early calving stages so far this spring. Or calling it spring, we're still in the winter, but your spring calvers that start out early so they can wean those big calves off of their cows. But you look at some individual quotes there on Wednesday, and like I said, Bassett just had a barn burner. They don't have any better cattle anywhere in the world than right in that Sandhill region there in Bassett, Nebraska. Gets the cattle in there, and they get those farmer feeder orders there, and they are go get 'em orders. The order specifics do not usually include a price. They just say, I want so-and-so's cattle, I want this many of them, I want them to be right, and they will be right when you buy them there. But the one stick out quote there was 53 head of thinner flesh steers in Bassett, Nebraska, weighed 602 at 191.75. So that's a pretty steep price there, but a good test of the market right in the center of the Southern Plains right there in Dodge City, Kansas at Winter Livestock. They had 2 loads of 865-pound feeder steers at 149. That's your feeder flash for Thursday.